Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. As we have done for Susan, Barbara and Ian before her, in today's special rambling in the TARDIS, we will take a look back at Vicki. We'll be talking about her strengths and her weaknesses and picking out her best and worst episodes.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on Vicki. To join in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TimeTeamp, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com.
Cool. So, Trish, before we give into... No, I suppose we'll do the overall of the character afterwards because that would make the most sense. So, are you still fuming after her sudden departure?
Yes, I am. It's still very raw, and I'll probably talk about it later on in the overall. But yes, I'm still miffed about how this character left the show.
So this session is a salt in the wounds thing for you.
A little bit. Although in fairness, most of these ramblings are kind of they start off salt in the wounds because I have to highlight the fact that the person is no longer on the show, but then it becomes cathartic towards the end. So maybe we'll have the same effect this time.
Okay, so for anyone that is listening now at the moment and carries on with us through to the end, mark that statement down for when we get to Sarah Jane Smith.
Shut up.
Okay. There. So, as we do with everyone, we have the four categories, as we said earlier on, which are their strengths, their weaknesses, their best episodes, and their not-so-best episodes. So, do we want to start off with her strengths and go into her weaknesses, or do we want to do it the other way around?
We usually do strengths first. Let's start with her strengths.
Okay. So, I think, again, part of the healing process is maybe you should go first.
Okay, so for Vicki's strengths, I have a few things noted down. The first one is actually my favourite thing about Vicki. Although it's the one thing that I probably, in certain circumstances, understand the least. Which is that she sees the beauty in every living creature. You know, and we get that from her very first episode. So, like, in the rescue, that weird frickin' Sandy, right? Just call it that, right? I don't really know how to describe it. But
you're beautiful on the inside.
Yeah, she sees the beauty in every living creature, you know, whether it's a weird, like, prehistoric dog, dinosaur looking thing, or whether it's a giant ant, or whether it's a Michelin man crossed with a Roomba, you know. And that's one of the great things about her. You know, it's one of the things that sort of highlights the fact that, like, she is still quite young, you know, and she's just sort of innocent, but in a nice way, not in a innocent equals dumb kind of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. She's not ditzy.
Yeah. Very good. And that sort of, like, leads on to the next thing, which is, like, she is incredibly intelligent. And it's one of the things that, you know, I'll get to it later on when we talk about overall, but it's one of the things that I wish we'd gotten to see more. We got some nice examples of it, but they were mostly throwaway examples, with one exception I'll get to later. But she is incredibly intelligent. You know, I wouldn't say she's, like, on the level of the Doctor, but they can have a very intelligent conversation that, for example, in, you know, before the current season, but, like, in season 2, you know, they could have really high level conversations that Ian and Barbara had no clue what they were talking about. And she could converse on that level, which was great.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. Like, for me, the strengths I have are that she's very intelligent. Mm-hmm. She's courageous. She's definitely confident. She's definitely confident. She's compassionate and she's caring. And, like, you know, with the compassionate side of things, you know, we talked about Sandy, but then in the web planet we have Zombo. You know, like this creature which, you know, a couple of minutes ago was more than content to try and kill her, but now that it's under their control, she kind of goes, "Oh, can we please keep it? Can we?
I think a lot of that, though, is, I think she's because she's quite intelligent, she recognizes things for what they are. So, like, if you look at Sandy, like, as much as she says, "Oh, it's a pet and I've trained it and whatever," I mean, if we think back to that episode, it was used as a deterrent for intruders. You know, those swords that were pushing Ian off the edge of the cliff. The point was to drop him down into where Sandy ate. That was the point.
Yeah.
But Vicki doesn't look at it from it's an evil creature. She looks at it from it's a creature and that's what it does. It has to eat. Why is this a problem? And the same with the Zarbi. It's like, well, this is a mind-controlled ant. So now we've taken away the evil mind control. It's just an ant. And like at the end of the episode, we see her like playing with one of them.
Yeah.
And she just sees everything for what it is. She doesn't see malicious intent, where malicious intent doesn't exist.
Yeah. Like, I think she's one of those people, like when you see, like, those, like, conservation videos of, like, snow leopards and all this type of stuff, and it's like, adopt a snow leopard, and they show, like, the cubs, and they, like, go, oh, and then someone says, but they grow up, and, like, a lot of people, like, I think Vicky's one of those ones that would go, I know, but that doesn't mean they're going to be bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's very much the way she is. I actually see that if Vicki was alive, like, current day, she'd be one of those people, like, she'd have the most off-the-wall pets, like...
Oh.
Not only just spiders and snakes and stuff, but like really random fucking shit that no one would ever keep as a pet.
Like a Komodo dragon walking down like Grafton Street on a leash or something like that.
Yeah. One of the other things that I really love about Vicki, and you kind of touched on it there. I mean, if you think about the words that you just used for it there, so she's very caring and compassionate, she's intelligent, and she's courageous. If you think about the group we saw her in the TARDIS with the most... Yeah. I'm going to exclude Stephen from this for the moment because he came in after her. But if we look at the group that she joined, they were courageous, caring, compassionate, and very intelligent.
Yeah. And
she sort of has the best bits of each of them, in a way, if that makes sense.
No, I'd agree, like, because, like, one thing I was going to ask you is that, like, the initial crew was the Doctor, Susan, Ian, and Barbara.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, Susan loved Ian and Barbara very much. And you'd be kind of wondering, did they take on a big brother and sister type role, or an aunt and uncle type role, or a paternal type role? And I suppose you'd ask the same question here for Vicki, who is actually an orphan, who has no other family members. And so the TARDIS becomes her family. So what type of relationship dynamic do you think she would have had with them? Or would it just be really, really close friends?
So for me, I definitely see the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan as a family unit. And that was pseudo-planned. Originally, Barbara in particular was meant to be younger. She was meant to be like in her early 20s. They aged her up a small bit. So that was kind of intentional. And you could tell that Susan looked to Ian and Barbara as parental figures. That's very obvious when you watch it. Vicki doesn't have that dynamic with them. I think the difference is that Vicki recognizes the fact that while yes, they're older, she's kind of more experienced when it comes to a lot of the stuff that they do because she's from the future.
Yeah.
And she's more advanced than they are. So I think the dynamic with Vicki, Ian, and Barbara, I think is very much a sort of older sibling or like an older cousin that you see, like that you sort of grew up with, do you know?
Yeah.
Where there's a considerable age difference, but like you still kind of hang out a lot and stuff like that. That's sort of the dynamic I see with them. Whereas with Ian, Barbara, and Susan, it was very much Ian and Barbara had to take care of Susan. And, maybe that wasn't what she needed, but it's a role they all kind of fell into.
Yeah, no, that kind of makes sense because, like, we were just saying about taking the best bits of the people that she was with. You don't necessarily need to be a family or a close family to take those kind of best bits, like, because, like, for example, like when you're on about older cousins, with a big age difference, I have a lot of cousins, and a lot of them are quite older than I am. And one of my cousins was, like, I would say that he was kind of instrumental in getting myself and my brothers, in some small part, in getting into science fiction. So, like, he would be someone like that I would take the best bits of his personality from to, that type of apply to everyday life, I suppose.
The last strength I have for Vicki, and then we can move on to her weaknesses, is a sort of the culmination of what we were just talking about in terms of family dynamics and how does the family of the TARDIS work out, which is that Vicki is incredibly close to the Doctor. Almost immediately. Like, she latches on to him like a lifeline the minute he walked in to that crashed ship. But one of the things that I love about her, and I think is a strength of, I don't know if it's like a strength as a person, but it's a strength of the character that they wrote, is she's basically the little doctor. Do you know? She's always up for adventure. He says it himself, like she's always looking to see what's over the next hill. And the two of them together are golden. Do you know? Like, I said it when Ian and Barbara left the show. I was like, can you imagine just the Doctor and Vicki wandering around space on their own, just the two of them?
You kind of get the impression like that, like if there was ever a Halloween episode, like Vicki would just dress up like the Doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love that about her. I love that it draws you into her as a character in a big way. So that was my last strength that I had for her.
Yeah, like I think we're kind of on the same board with or the same page with the strengths side of things, because like she was a very strong character, and the weaknesses, which I think we'll move on to now, aren't weaknesses in the classical sense. They're more like character flaws than anything.
Yeah,
in my estimation.
I think particularly with Vicki, I think they're very much believable personality flaws. Like, they're not like weaknesses in the sense of, you know, she's a coward or something like that, but they're very much, she's a well-rounded person, so she's going to have negative things. Everyone does. For me, I have two that really stood out. One, carrying on from what I just said, you know, she's always up for adventure to see what's over the next hill, but I don't think she always considers what could actually be over there. Do you know? And
no, absolutely not.
The best example I can give of that is her fucking exit, staying in fucking Troy. Like, that was not a well thought out conversation in the fucking least.
No, because like you've had how many conversations with this guy?
3.
And yeah, 3 conversations with this guy, and like that just could be it. That could be the extent of how much you like this person.
Yeah, and you know, I don't
at least
go on.
At least Susan and David kissed.
Yeah, Susan and David kissed. They were playful with each other. They interacted in a variety of environments. You know, they first met when Susan was effectively recruited into their anti-Dalek resistance thing. But then they worked together. They had, you know, interactions together. She cooked him food. They had playful moments. They were cute, like. But the thing that makes Susan's is still upsetting because it wasn't her choice. It was a choice she wanted to make, but she didn't have the courage to make. So the Doctor made it for her. But I imagine if Susan was slightly older at the time and felt a bit more comfortable with the Doctor sort of travelling by himself, we know that Susan can survive pretty much not a problem on Earth in, you know, what is it, 2100s or whatever, because she has lived in other time periods, you know. Other than a couple of weird, like, anachronisms, she did quite fine in the 1960s. You know, 1 or 2 weird things that kind of made people quirk an eyebrow about her, but overall she was fine. And where she was staying, people knew and accepted the fact that she wasn't from there. Do you know? Like, David knew she was from the future, and David knew who she was. Whereas in Vicky's case, no one believes she's from the future, not really. They think that she's some weird, like,
crazy old
soothsayer or something like that, yeah. And they refuse to call her by her actual name. And, you know, Troilus doesn't even know who she really is. So that to me just sort of shows, like, this sense of adventure. You need to think things through a little bit, Vicky.
Yeah, you mean you're not Trojan? But honestly, I am nice. That doesn't matter.
The other one I had for her, and then I'll hand it over to you for your ones, is she has this cheeky, playful nature, which is great, and it's very funny to watch. But it can come across as incredibly rude and mean-spirited. I don't think it's intentional. You know, like a lot of people who do it that way. But it can come across as rude and mean-spirited. And the best comparison to make, and we've discussed this on the show before, is when you and I worked together making pizzas for a living.
Yes.
And I would take the mickey out of you. You knew the way it was intended.
Yeah.
Other people around us didn't. And just thought I was a right bitch. That all I did was deride my friends at work. Which wasn't the case. It was funny. And you used to take the piss out of me when it would come up as well.
Yeah, that was the thing. It was always like situational based stuff. Like it was like if you ever made a mistake, I would leap on my one and only opportunity of which to make fun of you, and that was it.
Yeah, I think the difference with Vicki is like just because we never really see, with the exception of the chase, where Ian called her stupid or something. We never see that playful nature going the other direction.
No.
Which is why it comes off as a little bit rude and mean-spirited, because we don't see it as a two-way street, if that makes sense.
No, it does, like, because, like, like you pointed out that when, like, on the chase, that when Ian does call her a twit, it's like, Jesus, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, we've never seen that level of kind of back and forth between them. And that wasn't even back and forth, it was just him calling her a twit. But, no, that is one of my things already, is that at times she can be rude and slightly condescending. And all I just have in my head is like Barbara reaching her breaking point and doing that thing from Pulp Fiction where it's like, call me old one more goddamn time. I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Call me old. And then just kicking her out of the TARDIS. But, yeah, no, so like, I think it's, like, she's always 16. And we've been told time and again like that, like her dad died in the crash and that her mom had passed away a lot earlier. And is it one of those things of where, like, you know, most other movies you'd see like that type of character would be like the sassy heroine.
Yeah.
Whereas here, because we have the established heroes and heroines or heroes already, is that she comes in, it's like, Jesus Christ, like, you know, what gives you the fucking right to speak to people this type of way, you know?
Yeah, and I wonder if, like, saying that, I wonder if part of it is, and this is total, like, in-universe stuff, because out-of-universe, obviously, they didn't think this through in this way, I don't think. But in-universe, I wonder if, like, her mother died when she was quite young. And she was raised with her dad. So I wonder if it's just, like, she was always around the lads. Do you know, like, she was
possibly
on this ship with her dad, and, like, she was always with her dad's friends, and, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah. It's like, you know, she watches like her dad and his friends insult each other for hours on end. It's like, here, Vicki, you have a go. And at which point it just kind of goes, okay, pare it back a small bit.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, she'd see like adults riffing on each other, do you know? And so she just naturally does that as well. But
yeah,
when you don't have that relationship with them, it just comes across as rude. Like I said.
Yeah. And the last thing I have is, and I kind of said it again on the chase, is that despite her high level intellect and her vast, you know, education to the future, what sort of fucking fool says, "Hey Dracula, look out"? Fuck it, let him get staked, shot, whatever, run.
Yeah, I have this image of like the first time you were watching that, you know, you're watching it on your laptop or whatever. I have this image of you, like, I think you would have been living in Deer Park at the time. So I have this image of you, like, on the couch in Deer Park watching the story. So when that comes, I was going, like, you fucking donkey, what are you doing?
You're not far off. I was on a laptop, but I was actually, it was my final year of college. So it was when I was living across the way from the campus.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, I was just there, like, you know, having my dinner. And then I was like, look out. I just, mouthful of food, raised the eyebrow, and I was like, there's no one around here that I can look at. There's no one around I can share my confusion with. God damn it, where's Trish?
That's probably in a lab.
Yeah, probably. So how about we move on to the best bits and the worst bits?
Yeah, so for me, I have 2 for each.
Alright, yep.
So we'll start with her best moments. Yeah. I think it's definitely this. For me, anyway, it's the Space Museum and the chase. And I would put the chase number 1 and the Space Museum number 2. I think the only reason for that is that I think the chase is kind of a stronger story than the Space Museum overall. So it kind of helps elevate that a bit. But the reason why I like her in both of those is we get to see this intelligence she was bragging about for ages.
Yeah.
So she, like, from literally the moment we met her, she was going on about how she knew all this kind of stuff, whatever. And we finally get to see that, which is great. We get to see her working independently in both of those situations. So in the Space Museum, she's obviously working with Boba Fett and the rest of the Resistance.
Yeah.
And then in the chase, you know, she, after being a total donkey and getting left behind, you know, she's on that Dalek time ship and she's trying to contact the others. She's trying to find her way out. You know, she's very much using her intelligence and her intellect and jumping in with both feet into a situation where she could have very easily just cowered in the corner. And she didn't. And particularly with the chase as well, you know, at the end, when we talked about Ian and Barbara, the level of maturity she shows when Ian and Barbara want to leave. And, you know, we talked about the fact, like, would Vicki have tried to stop them, or would Susan rather have tried to stop them? And yeah, we agreed that she probably would. It would have been like a really upsetting scene to watch. And it's not that Vicki's not friends with them, because she is. And she cares about them a great deal. But she's also intelligent enough to realize that they didn't have a choice. And, you know, she comments on it herself. The two of them are perfectly happy to lounge on the couch eating grapes and having a chat.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's her compassion and her recognizing other people. It's her ability to read other people, which kind of goes back to that whole, like, seeing people for what they are type thing. That she's the one who calms the Doctor down in that situation, which is great. So for me, those are her top two, in my opinion.
Cool. So I'm there with you on one of them, and I have a completely different one for the other one. So the two that I picked are actually the Space Museum and the Romans.
Wow.
The Space Museum, again, because she got to show off the intelligence that she was bragging about. She helps, as you said, Boba Fett lead the Mandalorians to victory against the evil empire of Gary Glitter fandom. Look, this was the first practical application we got to see of her advanced education. And it was great. I thought it was really good. It was a great character standout moment, because splitting, like, I've likened, you know, early days of Who to like an RPG.
Yeah.
And, you know, in RPGs, one of the main rules is don't split the party, because, well, it's a headache for the GM to come up with stuff, and then it's just like you're just going to be fighting for screen time. Whereas in this, you can split the party, and you can have 4 or 3 or however many way you want to split it. You can have 4 fantastic storylines all going together at the same time. And I think Vicky's one was definitely the strongest of the 4 in the Space Museum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like, you know, it's great seeing the Doctor be Yoda and be funny, like tricking a machine into looking at penny farthing bicycles. It's always great seeing Barbara being a badass. It's always good. It's great to see Ian, you know, being like the chivalrous action man. But for a character that had so few standout moments throughout now, this was like a great, you know, solo lead or solo performance. And when it comes to the Romans, I like the Romans because straight off the bat, her first adventure, like, she fits in like a glove. Like, I remember I watched the Romans before I watched the Rescue, and I see that face. No, because I watched the Romans before I watched the Rescue because you recommended it, and I was like, okay, I wonder how long this character has been with the crew in order to, you know, get to this level of whatever. But it's straight there, and like, we get to see our relationship with the Doctor, which, you know, is the start of the whole mini Doctor side of things. That they're very kind of back and forth in the sense of you can give as good as you get type thing. She's sweet at times. She's really funny. And like, we got to see like a taste of how she handled things by herself in terms of, no, we don't know the ramifications of the choice that she was making, but her own internal conscience couldn't allow someone to be poisoned.
Yeah.
Which is why like, I really liked that one. And in terms of the chase was a middling one for me, because yeah, she does have some really cool moments. Like, you know, she gets stuck on the Dalek ship and she like does her best to try and communicate, and she alerts them to the fake doctor. But that's balanced by what she did to end up on the Dalek ship. So yeah, there was
this
that side of
character's
things.
entire on-screen time ruined by one line.
No, but I wouldn't have put it in as like it's not a bad moment, it's not a good moment, but it wouldn't be something I would put in the, if I was to ask for the best of, which I'm asked here now, for me it wouldn't be the chase. While the chase is a good story for her, there are some decisions that are good and some decisions that are bad.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I didn't consider the Romans, and now that you've mentioned it, I kind of do. I would probably put the Romans in my number 3 spot. I think because when I think of the Romans, I think of the Ian and Barbara storyline predominantly in that story. So everything else sort of gets pushed out of my brain. And with the exception of saving Barbara's life, Vicki doesn't really contribute as much to that story, which is why I generally don't think of her as a predominant character in that story. But in saying that, I think you and I have picked the chase and the Romans respectively for essentially the same reason, which is that we see the full sort of spectrum of her character in a way. You know, for the Romans, we get to see her compassion, her sense of adventure, the fact that like she fits like a glove, like she clearly, like you'd think that she'd been with these people for ages, and when they literally just left the previous place they'd been, where they picked her up. And for me, with the chase, then it's, you know, we get to see the wide range of her character, like going back to even to the first episode. We get to see her restlessness and her childishness. We get to see her sense of adventure. We get to see her humor / rudeness. We get to see her intelligence. And, you know, even with the stupid fucking donkey moment of telling Dracula to look out, it does show her compassion as well. She doesn't know that that's not a real person.
Yeah.
All she knows is she knows what the Daleks can do because she's heard of them before. And this person is just standing there. So she's going to warn them. So I think I would add the Romans as my number 3 spot now that we've discussed it. But personally, I still think the chase is her most well-rounded story.
Like normally we do total humor, it's great. Normally we do have like a top 3 per character, and going back through the rest of the stories, the chase probably would slot into the number 3 position for me. But one other thing that I just realized about the chase that I never really thought about until right now was that she seems superstitious as well. You know, like when they find the ring in the ground.
That's not superstitious. I don't read that as superstitious. I read that as every time I walk across a bridge that's like a rural bridge, you know, a bridge in a rural area, like a stone bridge, I instinctively walk faster. Because when I was little, when we used to go to Castle Gregory on holidays, there was, like, you know, the bridge on the way up to the village, and every time we'd come up to that bridge, my mum would tell me the story of the 3 billy goats, because that bridge has nowhere for a pedestrian. So if a car comes, you could get hit by a car. Yeah.
So not quite superstition, but like this sort of inbuilt self-defense mechanism to hurry the fuck up. It's a reminder
of your childhood, and you just sort of instinctively do the thing. So I would consider her story of like the fairy ring or whatever it was to be similar to me and billy goats.
That's fair. Like I think superstition is a small bit, or I suppose it's the fact that even with her education, the childhood stories still lend a small bit of credence. Yeah. So how about we move on to the low spectrum? Yeah.
So for her not so great performances, because I don't think Vicki actually has any bad episodes as such.
No, she does have like ones where it's just like, come on, Vicki.
But like she has no reign of terror. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, like, not to, like, you know, kind of besmirch or piss on the work of another character in the show. She doesn't have those moments. Yeah.
But the 2 that I would consider to be her weakest stories are The Crusade and The Web Planet. Yeah. Because you could take her out of those stories and absolutely bugger all would change.
You could definitely with your Crusade. I agree with you 100% in the sense of, as I pointed out at the time, like the main people in that story are Barbara and Ian.
Yeah.
And the Doctor is just observing historical events. He's not getting involved in. He's not trying to he's not accidentally manipulating stuff, or he's not getting involved in the palace schemes. He's just observing them. And Vicki, as a proxy, is like there as his fellow observee. And I think the only time she really has any bit of a moment is when she has her kind of back and forth with the Earl of Leicester.
Yeah, but the Doctor has one as well, which is why it's sort of...
Yeah. So like that it's kind of rendered a small bit moosh or superfluous.
Yeah.
So it's just like she's not there. That's pretty much what it is. She's just not there.
Yeah. With the web planet, I mean, I'm trying to think about what she contributed in the web planet.
Zombo.
Okay, that's a cute moment, but again, if you took that out,
yeah,
doesn't really change much.
Like for my notes, what I have is I don't think she contributed a whole lot. Like she really could have really fucked things up, because when the TARDIS starts getting dragged away, her immediate reaction is to start pressing and slapping buttons and switches. And it's like, you have no idea how this ship operates. You have no idea what you're potentially doing. You could be stranding your friends here.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it does nothing because there's no power.
Yeah.
But it could have done something.
Yeah.
And like the one sort of kick-ass moment she could have had never actually happened, which is, Vicki brandishing a spider. She does it twice, and it never ever comes up ever again.
Yeah, like the way that it kind of in my head is like, it's like those, what you think happens versus what really happens. And in my head, I think the best way to kind of make an equivalent is like when Sam picks up the light of Elendil in Return of the King, and he brandishes it and all the spiders back the fuck off.
Yeah.
That's probably what they were probably going for. Whereas with Vicki, it's like, you pick up a spider, you show it to your friend, you're like, that type of thing.
Yeah, but also, like, the Zarbi were terrified shitless of it. She used it twice. And she clearly has no problem holding a spider, because that's not a problem for her. Just keep it in your fucking pocket.
Yeah.
Do you know? Like, just keep it in your pocket and use it all the time.
Take a spider, put it in your pocket. Take a spider, put it in your pocket.
Yeah, because when that first kicked off, that part of it, I had a weird moment. I was like, oh wow, wouldn't it be really cool, and this is jumping the timeline a bit, but wouldn't it be really cool if the Animus was like at war with the giant spiders of Metabilis?
Mm-hmm. Or the Arachnos, or any of the other like arachnid species that we see.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. And then it wasn't that at all. I was like, oh, okay.
And like, actually, that's one thing kind of going back to just the Space Museum, is that's the first time you ever get a bit of a concept of big villains being at odds with each other. Because, like obviously we had the Dalek, be it as either just one Dalek or the representative of their victory over the Daleks. We'll never know. Like, you'd be kind of wondering about like all the amazing conflicts that the big villains or the big bads could be having outside of what we see in the show. But yeah, like with the Web Planet, it was, I think it would have been kind of cool to maybe have just one or two lines about why they are so afraid of spiders.
Yeah. Did you have any other episodes listed under your...
I don't think so, because like, again, everything would come down to having good and bad bits in it that wouldn't necessarily lend itself towards being a worst or a best moment. Like, that's why I suppose, like, if we were looking at a number 3 slot in each section, the chase would go into the positive side of things, and I would say maybe the myth makers would go into the worst moments because of the nature of the departure.
Yeah.
From both a character standpoint and a production standpoint.
Yeah, I did struggle with not putting that on the list, I'll be honest. Which people who listened to my rant on Monday would probably be like, they probably would have guaranteed I put it on the list. But I didn't, because
we try to keep it to the story as opposed to the decisions made around it. But even then, like, as you kind of said, that knowing someone for a grand total of like 18 hours and having 3 conversations with them. Like, okay, there are times, love at first sight and being instantly smitten with someone. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. And that's the type of scenario where, like, I think if they had wanted to do that, they should have done it from episode 1.
Yeah.
And they should have had a lot more back and forth between them.
Yeah, I think the reason why it didn't make the list, and I would put it in the middle, so it wouldn't be a best and it wouldn't be a worst, it would be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Is it's just that moment at the end, and I don't think it takes away from the Vicki we saw throughout the story, which is someone who doesn't need someone to come rescue her. She was doing perfectly fine on her own. The king loved her, the princes loved her. Yeah. She was perfectly fine by herself until Stephen came and cocked it up. So that's kind of why it didn't make it in for me. But speaking of the Mythmakers,
yes, Vicki
has now left.
Yes.
What do you think? We're going to just do this quite quickly, I think. So, what impact did Vicki's leaving have on you? If we compare it to Susan and Ian and Barbara, and then, what's your overall feeling on the character as a whole?
So the impact of Vicki leaving, it's the same as the first time, because now I haven't watched the majority of these episodes for over 10 years, okay, since my first big watch through, and I'm still kind of left with the exact same thing: uncertainty. When Susan left, we still had Ian and Barbara. When Ian and Barbara left, we had Vicki, who'd been with the crew for a very long time. And she had associated with Ian and Barbara, who'd been there since day one. Now we're left with Stephen. And so far, Stephen has been very up and down for me. So I'm curious as to see how the dynamic of the Doctor and Stephen and any other new companions coming into it. I think Katarina might have a bit of a shout because she's left in the TARDIS with them. How it will be. And so I am sad to see Vicki go, because I quite enjoyed watching Vicki, and trying to place her in the rankings of my companions, from just a estimated memory, she's probably in my top 10, but towards like the 9-10 mark. But obviously, the more we review, the more that might get pushed back to a top 15 or top whatever.
And in terms of the 4 that have now left, where is she in that 4?
I would say she's firmly entrenched in the number 3 spot.
Okay.
Because as much as I like Susan in shows or episodes like The Sensorites or her scenes from the Aztecs, I can't help but go back to the Keys of Marinus and the Reign of Terror and stuff like that. And it's, I think that Vicki was probably a stronger character than Susan overall.
I can see that. For me, Vicki leaving was interesting because, like I said, Stephen has kind of been up and down. We've only had like 3 stories with him as a companion at this point. So I'm not quite sure what's going to come next because I haven't seen it, so I have no idea what's coming. But for me, it didn't hit me the same way Ian and Barbara leaving hit me, and I don't think a lot of them are going to hit me as much as that.
No,
I didn't connect with her on the same level that I connected with them. Yeah. Saying that though, I am very sad that she's not going to be on it anymore, because I think when we think about modern companions and the relationship they have with the Doctor, I think Vicki was really the first sign of friends having fun together, because like we said that like Barbara kind of inspired like the way Donna speaks back to the Doctor and stuff like that. But their relationship was quite tumultuous because of the way it started. Vicky's started as fun.
Yeah.
It started as sad, but like it started as, it was fun from the first story that she was there proper. So if you compare it to like Amy, or if you compare it to Clara or something like that, you kind of get more of that with Vicki and the Doctor. And I kind of wanted to see more of that. The two of them were freaking adorable.
Yeah.
And so while it didn't emotionally hit me as much as Ian and Barbara leaving did, I am disappointed we're not going to get to see more, and I think the guy who fired Maureen for having an opinion is a dick.
Big time.
In terms of where I would rank her overall with my companions, to be honest, I don't really know. I generally don't think outside my top 5. She's not in my top 5 overall. I don't really go beyond that because it just chops and changes depending on my mood. In terms of the 4 who have left, though, I actually liked Susan more.
All right.
I love Vicki and her interactions with the Doctor, but I didn't connect with Vicki as a character. And I think I connected more with Susan from a sort of... I can be quite mumsy to people, as you're aware.
Yes.
Which is ironic since you're the parent in this friendship and I'm not. But Susan I wanted to take care of, and I sort of had that connection with that character through that. I think also because Ian and Barbara wanted to take care of her and I connected with Ian and Barbara, I connected with the way they connected with Susan. That makes sense? Vicki is a really fun character to watch, but I didn't really have an emotional connection to her. I liked watching her on screen, but I didn't really emotionally connect with her. So for me, she's the 4th, but like that's not bad. It's 4 out of 4 people that I had a good experience watching.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, like, you know, where you talk about, say, you talk about like famous trilogies of movies, like the original Star Wars trilogy or other stuff, or even like the Alien trilogy. You'd be kind of going, just because something's in the final slot doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing.
No,
it just makes it the one that you want. You'd go back to least if you were given the option to go back.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. I probably wouldn't watch any of Vicky's stories that don't have Ian or Barbara in them, with the exception of the handful of clips I'd watch of the Time Meddler that make me laugh my ass off.
So a ringing endorsement for the Time Meddler.
Yeah.
But I do get your point about, you know, emotional connections to characters. Like, your top 5 are your top 5 for a reason.
Yeah,
they're the characters that you empathize with the most because you see you're part of yourself in them, or part of themselves in you. Anything past that, it feels like you're diminishing the impact that those 5 characters had. Like, you can still appreciate characters, you can still enjoy seeing them on screen, but you don't necessarily have to connect with them in order to like them to that extent.
Yeah.
So another rambling has gone by. Another person has left the TARDIS crew onto potentially bigger and better things, but never. It's not going to be the case at all.
Yeah, I really need to crack out my copy of the Iliad to see how that story ends.
I would say listen to Frostfire, which is her first companion chronicle that she did for Big Finish. Cool. That kind of takes place after Troy, and it's a really good story. It's her narrating an adventure that she had. Now, I think it's with Stephen and the Doctor, but it could also be with Barbara and Ian. I'm not entirely sure, but I'd say to check it out.
Cool, I will add that to my list.
Yeah, it's Maureen O'Brien speaking for like an hour. Like what more could you?
Yeah, she's great. So we will call it there on another rambling. We will be back on Monday with the Daleks Master Plan. Ooh.
Yes, indeed. I know.
What's that going to be?
I wonder what they're up to.
Yeah. If you have any thoughts and feelings about Vicky as a character that you want to share, you can reach out to us on our socials that we share at the top of the show. And we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.